So one semester when I was in college, I think it was my junior year. I went to this lecture with. It was a lecture that was just being offered on campus one night, and I wasn't a big lecture guy. I mean, I wouldn't have typically gone to something unless I kind of had to go, I guess. But this one was a little different. The speaker, the person who was giving the lecture, really kind of caught my eye, and I wanted to hear what he had to say. He was a retired Vietnam War veteran. He was a Navy officer. He was also a prisoner of war. He spent about 5 years in what came to be known as the Hanoi Hilton, which is the notorious prison run by the North Vietnamese. It was kind of a place of, they say, just unimaginable pain and suffering and evil. Movies have been made about it, books have been written about it. Well, anyway, this guy lived it. He was there. There must have been 2,000 people in this auditorium. And you could hear a pin drop. I'll never forget it. He was amazing. We were spellbound. He was probably about, I don't know, maybe about 50 years old. And I can't even remember his name. I've tried to remember who it was. Some of those POWs became kind of famous, and John McCain and Jeremiah Denton. Some of them ran for office. This guy, I don't think any of that happened. So I just don't remember who he was. But I remember what he said in detail. He described life in this hellish prison, the torture, the different ways in which the North Vietnamese really just tried to break the spirit of these heroes. He also described the resistance, the ways in which mostly officers would push back and try to just certainly resist all that the enemy was doing to them. I remember him talking about this system that they devised to communicate when they were in solitary confinement. It was called TAP code, T-A-P code. And it was kind of a language that they developed. It was amazing, that really allowed these POWs to communicate without ever actually speaking. They'd tap on the wall of their cell. Different taps meant different letters. They would combine the letters, which would make for words, and then ultimately sentences. And that's how these guys spoke to each other without ever really opening their mouths. They'd share information across these cells. I remember in this lecture, he spent a lot of time talking about the physical stuff, the physical pain, the torture. It was kind of sickening, some of the detail with which he spoke. But I tell you, more than that, more than the physical, I remember him talking about the pain and really the torture of isolation, of being alone, and just the kind of the horror of that. At the end of his talk, there was a Q&A, tons of questions. Most of them were about the torture. Most of it was about the physical stuff. How did you survive this? How did you endure that? How did you not break? Anyway, he described that, he answered the questions, but he just always seemed to go back to the pain of being alone, the fear of it, the cost of it. I mean, I was only, 20 or 21 at the time, so I guess I didn't quite get it. I guess I didn't really have an appreciation for or an understanding of the pain of really being alone. I don't know, maybe that's why he was driving that point home to this crowd of mostly college kids. And the importance of the community, the need for people, and the absolute danger of isolation. Jesus got it. Jesus knew it. He must have. I mean, look at what he does here in this gospel. he's kind of delivering his marching orders to this group of 72. They're going out on their mission. Well, what's the first detail of the mission? Well, the first marching order? Don't go alone. Don't do this alone. We're told he sent them out in pairs. You know, that Navy officer, that total, absolute hero. This guy was so amazing. He was so humble. He kept deflecting all the sort of the honor that we kind of wanted instinctively to kind of address to him. He didn't want the attention. He didn't want the spotlight. He kept talking about other heroes that he was with. You couldn't help but just love this guy. Well, remember, he said the worst. The worst was when you were in solitary and the guy next door to you in the cell next door who was also alone, was when he'd be removed from solitary. And he wasn't replaced, then you were really alone in your cell. You couldn't use this tap code thing. There was nobody on the other side of the wall to try to speak to. And he said that's when you were afraid you were going to lose your mind. That was when like hopelessness started to creep closer. Just the loneliness and the isolation was unbearable. I don't know if he said this, but I almost feel like he did. It was that was as bad as the beatings and the starvation, the isolation. Like I said, I don't remember his name. He wrote a book. He was selling it that night. I had the book. The book is long gone. I remember looking for it. I wish I remembered him. But I remember what he said. This talk, this danger of being alone. Jesus must have gotten it. He must have known it because he made it clear. You do not do this alone. Where I'm going to send you, you are going to encounter, he says, wolves. You're going to encounter the devil. So don't go alone. There's power in company. There's power in community. Look at the power of this night in this setting. You know, when I was in the seminary, I went in the seminary after college. So it was sort of like grad school. And the program was 5 years long. You had to do 2 years, and then you got a break from school, and you spent a year living in a parish. I've talked about this year from my life. It was a big one. It was an important one. You just kind of lived in a parish and learned about church life, parish life, priesthood. So I went to St. Patrick's in Smithtown, and it was a great year for me. It kind of sold the deal. I went into that year thinking I wanted to be a priest, but I left pretty sure this was what God wanted from me, and it was what I wanted. Each member of my class, we all were sent to different parishes. Some guys, Nassau, Suffolk, Brooklyn, Queens. Anyway, my two best friends, my two classmates, they both left the seminary at the end of that year in the parish. One reconnected with an old girlfriend who he ultimately married. The other met a girl that year in the parish who he ultimately married. Clearly, I was doing something wrong. So I went back to the seminary alone. Man, that was a long, lonely year for me. I miss these guys so much. It was very tough to be there without them. You know, if you ever had an experience, like a difficult, challenging experience where you're with other people and you kind of have the same goal and often like this common enemy, you know, you bond in that situation. Maybe it's at work and you got some boss who's a lunatic. And you come close together, the people you work with, because you can't believe how crazy or difficult this person is. Maybe it was a football camp you went on for a week or two one summer, and it was more like boot camp than football camp. Same thing. So you were in it together, and there's power in that. Well, and I realized that big time that year when I went back, because I was lost without these guys. You know, when you go out in pairs, or even more than pairs, when you're more than alone, you build each other up. When you're down, the other one says, come on, you got to get back in this. Don't forget why you're doing it. Don't forget why we're here. And then when they're down, you build them up. Maybe that's what I suspect. That's why he sent them out, not alone. Well, I didn't realize the power of that so much until that year. It was a very long, unhappy year. But I knew by then what I wanted, and I was pretty sure of what God wanted of me. And I wanted more of that. So I survived. I survived a long year. Part of it, I just think I had to muscle through. Don't you just sometimes have to do that in life? There's really not a whole lot another person can do. It's just, it is what it is, and it stinks, and it hurts. It's painful, but you just muscle through. And with time, over time, it gets a little bit easier. And depending on what the pain is, sometimes it never fully goes away. I understand that. But you make it happen. Sometimes that's what you got to do. Something else happened to me that year. In addition to me kind of muscling through, something else happened. Actually, someone else happened. Jimmy Cassane happened. He was a seminarian. He was a year ahead of me. We were actually the same age, but he was a year ahead. He went in a year before me. And that year when I came back and when I was miserable and lonely, we happened to be right next to each other. Our rooms were right next to each other. I'm telling you, he kind of rescued me. We were kind of friendly before, but we really weren't friends. Kind of liked each other. We came from similar backgrounds. His father was a city cop. My father was a city fireman. Both came from these Irish Catholic families. But I'm telling you, that year, I'm not sure what I would have done if he wasn't there. And I just think kind of like God sent him my way. I mean, isn't that what this gospel is about? People being sent, him sending us out. And I'm not saying it was a miracle thing. I mean, hey, he was in the seminary already. He had to live somewhere on one of the hallways. It's just, I guess, a coincidence that we were right next to each other, and very practically we just saw each other more often and became friends in the process. And it helped me big time. Look at this gospel. He sends 72. Well, it didn't end with the 72. They were the first 72. He's never stopped sending them. He sends them to this day. He sends us 2 by 2, at least 2 by 2. Because isolation is toxic. Isolation is painful. Think of grief, the pain of loss. A spouse who's lost her husband or wife. And just the unimaginable pain of that. And in the days after the funeral, people stay close. The adult kids are around, and they stay close. But you know that can't last forever. Eventually, they got to go back wherever they're going to, and the phone calls become a little less frequent from friends. And then finally, you had that first day or that first night when you were there alone, and it's the worst. But you muscle through. And people show up. People who were sent. People who were God sent. I mean, I can't prove that Jimmy Cassane was sent by God to me that year, but I don't care. I'm not going to try to prove it to anybody, but I'm telling you, That was more than a coincidence. I think that's how God works. You know, those of you who have got grandkids, maybe grandkids now who are middle school or high school or college age, and you're with them, and you're watching them on their phone, and you can't believe how often they're on the phone. Like, they're sort of never off it. It's kind of obnoxious. What they're communicating, not intentionally, is whoever I'm talking to or whatever I'm reading is more important than you, grandma or grandpa. They're sitting at the table and they're on it. You want to smack the phone out of their hand. And you know it's just not good. You look at your kids, their kids, and they're like looking aggravated. They're addicted to this stuff, and it creates this weird isolation. It's more than annoying. It's dangerous. We're seeing it everywhere. I was watching this interview with a bus driver. This guy's been driving school buses for years. And he said, you know how he was asked, well, he was making the comment of how things have changed. He said, when you get on the bus now after school, it's quiet. Nobody talks because they're all on their stupid phone. Who are they even talking to? What are they even reading or watching? He was like, 10 years ago, you couldn't shut them up. They were all talking to each other. Now this weird isolating thing has happened. I mean, hey, I think we're catching it. I think we're realizing it. Thankfully, the schools are starting to say no more. They're putting restrictions in because this is not good. Hey, it's not the Hanoi Hilton, but it's related. Isolation isn't good. That's why he sent us out 2 by 2. The power of company, the pain of alone. Underestimate neither. And don't go it alone.